You've heard it said that we all need to do our bit for the planet, whether it's avoiding plastic straws, carrying reusable shopping bags, using low energy light bulbs. Sure, these are just little things, but everybody doing a little, it all adds up, doesn't it? Well, it turns out that there's research that highlights there's a right way and a wrong way to go about that sort of thing, and guess which one most of us are taking. Let's have a look. My name's Mallen Baker. This is the Mallen Baker Show for change makers. Do you ever buy something because you feel it's the right thing to do, from a moral standpoint or even just for the sake of your health? Whatever the basis of that moral standpoint, this video will be of interest. For a lot of people who come to this channel, that may focus on buying green products, but it could include a host of other issues, whether you try to buy local, whether you avoid animal testing or companies associated with child labour. The point is, you want to make a positive difference to the world, even if in quite a small way, so you buy this thing or you avoid that other thing. Last year, before we all got hit by other considerations, there were a lot of people boycotting plastic straws. This was driven by the documentaries that showed a hideous amount of plastic rubbish in the oceans, which included use once and throw away plastic items such as straws. Avoiding straws, it's such a small thing, but every little bit helps, doesn't it? Or maybe you might buy low energy light bulbs or have canvas shopping bags that you reuse. The principle remains the same. It's that by doing your bit, you're making a small contribution to add to the net positive effort to protect the environment, or whatever it may be. You're not the CEO of a big company, or the president or prime minister of your country, but at least you can do this bit and make things a little bit better. Yeah, actually not so much. I've been reading a book called The Willpower Instinct by Kelly McGonigal. She describes how psychologists have shown a consistent effect in how people behave, which they describe as moral licensing. The core of the principle is this: if you can do something morally good, you then instinctively feel you've earned the right to do something bad. You'll recognise some widely commented on aspects of this phenomenon. You see something you want in the shop window, then you decide to be strong and not to buy it. You're then much more likely to see something in the next shop window and conclude that since you were so good and you saved that money by not buying the previous thing, you've earned the right to buy the next thing. Do you recognise that? What about the commonly mocked sight of the overweight consumer, often overweight, buying a triple burger and fries and a Diet Coke? Yes, indeed, the inclusion of a Diet Coke really does fool the brain into thinking it's earned the right for a more indulgent meal. One study found that people who chose to purchase an eco-friendly product were then more likely to cheat on a test that paid them for each correct answer. So in that case, the moral bad wasn't in the related field to the moral good at all. It was just very generally, you do a good thing, you've earned the right to do a bad thing. Then there are some effects it's slightly harder to rationalise but seem related. A 2009 report by an auto insurance company found that the drivers of hybrid cars, at that time the car of choice of those who want to reduce their impact on the planet, were involved in more collisions, received 65% more traffic tickets and drove 25% more miles than other drivers. But driving more miles is certainly related, because if your vehicle's more efficient, then while logically the whole point of that is that your consumption will have lower impact, what the brain actually quietly, subconsciously concludes is that you have license to drive the extra, so that you're actually enjoying more benefit for the same impact. This can translate into how people respond to penalties and charges that are sometimes introduced to incentivise the right behaviours. Because it makes sense, doesn't it? Make the bad things more expensive, then people will gravitate to the good things. Classic economic theory. At least if you think we're all economic self-interest maximising robots called economic man. But human beings are more subtle than that. Systems that require a penance for bad behaviour don't seem to work. University of Melbourne economists thought that, for instance, paying an additional $2.50 to your energy company to plant trees to offset some of your carbon would likely lead to you using energy more freely at home, therefore making a bigger impact. Also, daycare centres that charge people a fine for picking up their children late found that it actually increased the number of late pickups because the parents were quite happy to buy the added convenience of being late. The charge legitimised being late rather than stigmatising it, which was the original intention. It's just another example of why you have to understand the difference between policies that actually work, having the desired impact with how people behave, and policies that intuitively feel as though they should work, but ultimately don't. If you're serious about changing the world for the better, you have to take that extra step in caring about whether what you do is actually going to make the difference in practice. So, doing your own little bit for the planet is highly likely to mean you give yourself license to overconsume elsewhere or do something else that you might otherwise have felt guilty about. So it's not really helping, not even a little bit. All it's really doing is giving you license to carry on as you would wish while kidding yourself that you've played your part. And bear in mind, this often happens on a subconscious level. You're not even going to remember the trade-off that you made for many of these things in the past. And you're also highly likely to fool yourself on the degree of positive choices you make and negative choices you make. Marketers understand this phenomenon only too well, as they discovered in practice time and time again that when answering surveys, customers will say that they care about various issues and suggest that those issues have definitely influenced their purchasing in the past. But when you go on to track their actual buying behaviour, those good intentions are not backed up by what they see. There was a famous focus group exercise carried out by the bread company Hovis, who went through a period of edgy marketing. Rather than putting pictures of bread on the product wrappers, they put pictures of the things that you might have with your bread. There were some with cucumber slices, there were some with tomatoes, and there were some with baked beans. In the focus group, to give consumer responses to the concepts, the message came back loud and clear that the least favoured design was the one with the baked beans. But in real life, those were the ones that flew off the shelves, and the company had to adjust its quantities accordingly. And they realised that the focus group had given them a bum steer, simply because none of the mothers in that group wanted to admit publicly that they fed their kids baked beans on toast, which is actually quite a nutritious snack, but that's another matter. So this is an area where we're prone to fooling ourselves and others, whether we realise it or not. One expression of that is compensating for our good deeds, our little eco-choice, with moral licensing to do more bad stuff elsewhere. And you know how I feel? I'm cool with that. I think we will resolve the problems we face by changing systems, not by individuals choosing not to use plastic straws. The question for you is whether you do something like that because you want to seriously be a change maker, to make a difference to the world, or whether it's just what people these days will refer to as virtue signalling, either to other people or even just to yourself, because we all want to generally feel that we're one of the good guys. If it's the former, you really want to make some sort of a difference, then it's worth understanding the difference in approaches. The buying one product or boycotting one product approach is highly likely to lead to this moral licensing. But there is an approach that doesn't seem to have this effect, which is where you pay for something that replaces a harmful act. So, for instance, selecting a tariff on your electricity bill to use green sources of energy. Apparently, that doesn't produce a moral licensing effect. Instead, it strengthens the buyer's commitment to the environment. And that comes down to a sense of identity. I'm the kind of person who cares about the planet when making choices. Or even just, I'm the kind of person who cares about the environment. Or my community, or whatever it may be. Your flavour may differ. It underlines that it isn't just an environmental point. How you define your identity is hugely more influential on how you behave. Doing one little bit for the planet can feel like a chore, a duty imposed on an otherwise normal person. But once you've defined yourself, created your own self-image as the kind of person who behaves in a certain way, it's much more likely your other actions will line up to become more consistent. More consistent. None of us live our values perfectly. It's the difference between whether you focus on moral actions or moral personality traits. If you focus on individual moral actions, you're more likely to indulge in moral licensing. If you focus on the character traits that you choose to define you, that's a different matter altogether. By the way, this doesn't only apply to you and me, it also applies to companies as well. and by extension, I suppose, to other institutions. Yale economist Matthew Cochrane argued that small green actions by companies could similarly license larger harmful behaviours. Campaigners have tended to jump on these and give them the label of greenwashing and assume that they're a deliberate smokescreen tactic to throw consumers off the scent, which may well be true some of the time, but it's also likely to be the corporate expression of moral licensing. And I've certainly personally been in several business meetings where executives were genuinely astonished and bemused to be told that their company hadn't quite nailed the positive impact thing as firmly as they genuinely believed. But this is why there has been a move in recent years for companies to begin speaking a lot more about what they call corporate purpose. If you define the company as existing to make a positive difference to the world and thereby earning the right to make a profit, it's a very different mindset to where you simply see the business of business is business and everything that you might do is additional to the core. The company cuts its pollution because it's kind of doing its bit for the planet. Whereas companies like Unilever that define their purpose around the difference they make to people's lives and their well-being have a huge amount more energy that they put into those aspects of the business, and it has paid off for them. As their former chief executive Paul Polman said in the interview I did with him, which you can find on this channel, they were invited into certain countries that were only just opening up to outside business investment, precisely because those countries saw that Unilever actively tried to benefit the societies where they was based. And they wanted that sort of business in their country. So that's the conclusion from all of this. Whether at an organisational level or your own personal level, identity is much more powerful than reason, much more powerful than guilt or shame or any of those things we tend erroneously to believe are big drivers of our behaviour. Define the person you want to be, then project yourself into that identity in how you live your life.